Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hello everyone. Welcome to Basics Discussion Circle and Meditation. My name is Travis. I facilitate this group. In this class, we go through one teaching each month, one factor of the Eightfold Path each month. This month, we're starting with the right action. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. I always like to start by going around the room. We can introduce ourselves since this is intended to be a discussion-based group. So we could give our name and why we practice. So my name's Travis. I practice because I have to. We can go to Rachel.
Rachel, I don't know at this moment, but I do, I enjoy it. I actually do.
My name's Maxwell. I am here because I also enjoy it. Feels good.
My name's Griffin. Jeff the other week said there's two types of people that attend these classes, and it's therapists and those seeking therapy. But I think it's both. So.
I'm Carol, and my therapist recommended
Hi, Roberto. The answers I find in Buddhism have been helping with life.
I'm Nirmal. I'm looking for therapeutic help, peace of mind.
I am Mardell. I do it to just relax.
I'm John. I do it similarly to keep my anxiety in check.
I'm Brendan, and I do the meditation to relax.
My name's Steve. I actually don't do it, and I'm trying to learn more about it.
Robin, it gives me hope.
I'm Tim, and it helps me stay somewhat sane.
So thank you everyone for sharing. And then Sherry said, I practice because I have to too. Helps with stress and anxiety and improving patience. So thank you everyone for sharing. I'll read a little bit of a sutra. Sutras are the words of the Buddha. The sutra is about because we're talking about right action this month. Right action is part of the virtue aspect of the Eightfold Path, the virtue aspect of the Buddhist training. So it's living virtuously or morally. So the standard definition of right action, the sutra that I would read if I was reading the sutra about right action would say something like, what three qualities are to be abstained from by one practicing right action? To abstain from killing, to abstain from stealing, and to abstain from causing sexual harm. That's the baseline right action. But the sutra I want to read here talks about the kind of benefits of living virtuously, or why virtue is an integral part of Buddhist practice. Then there is the case where you recollect your own virtues. They are untorn, unbroken, unspotted, and liberating, praised by the observant and conductive to concentration. At any time when a disciple of the Noble Ones is recollecting virtue, their mind is not overcome with obsession, nor aversion, nor delusion. Their mind heads straight, based on virtue. And when the mind is headed straight, the disciple of the Noble One gains a sense of the goal, gains a sense of the Dharma, gains joy connected with the Dharma, In one who is joyful, rapture arises. In one whose mind is enraptured, the body grows calm. One whose body is calmed experiences ease. In one at ease, the mind becomes concentrated. So the sutra points out that virtue acts as a support for concentration or a support for the meditation practice. If we come to Buddhism expecting that the meditation will just fix everything and we don't have to change anything else, you'll be sorely disappointed. The meditation helps us see the ways in which we're causing suffering within how we act and engage in the world, with how we interact and engage with our own mind. And it's through adopting principles of heedfulness and non-affliction in our actions that the mind can actually become concentrated. And then through concentration, we can give rise to insight and see the nature of why we're suffering, see the nature of why we decided to come here tonight on a Thursday night, see it more clearly. So in that way, virtue leads to concentration, and concentration leads to discernment or wisdom. So tonight, because the first line in there, I believe, on a list, the skillful virtues have freedom from remorse as their reward. So by living virtuously, we have less remorse. And as we sit down here to practice, we're creating less of a mess that we have to clean up. We're living our lives in a way that's not that we go about our whole day making a mess of everything and then sit down for 10 minutes hoping to sort all of that out. Progress is never made if we don't change the way that we're living, change the way that we're interacting. When we stop doing the things that made us have to come here on a Thursday night, then when we sit down, we can slowly sift through those things. If we don't change our actions, we're just going to be rehashing the same issues over and over and over again without ever really making any progress, other than becoming even more aware of how much pain we're in. Which maybe that's what we need to get the motivation to actually make changes sometimes. So tonight, because freedom from remorse is kind of the topic or the theme that comes from virtue, we'll be doing a forgiveness meditation. Few things before we get started. So with forgiveness meditation, know that it might not necessarily be pleasant, it might not be enjoyable, but it is incredibly beneficial to do. So, and it's something that with practice can become enjoyable when we get the hang of it, because it allows us to give space to feelings, space to any kind of feelings, any remorse, any resentment that arises. It gives us a platform to be able to process it, to be able to allow it to exist, and without trying to like shove it back down, repress it back down, or push it away. It allows it to be there in a way that it can tire itself out and we can release it. So I'll give instruction during the meditation. The only bit I like to give before is we're not trying to focus on any specific storylines about what happened or things like that, or what we did or didn't do, or what someone else did or didn't do. We're focused on how it feels in the body in this moment. When we work with a phrase, and I'll share the phrase during the meditation, when we work with the phrase, notice how the body responds. Notice if we have a visceral reaction to it, a physical resistance to it. And then we're trying to consciously relax that. Then we can restate the phrase, notice if we get tense again, consciously relax it. That's pretty much this entire practice. The trick of this practice is to be able to state those phrases without launching into entire world building sessions around that phrase, entire dredging up a bunch of stuff about that phrase. We allow whatever's coming up to come up. We don't try to push it away. We don't try to ignore it. We allow it to be there and we soften into it. And we're not actively hopping on the train. We're not actively engaging the thoughts. If at any point during the meditation you feel tears coming, don't hold them in. You can let them out. This is a safe space for that. And actually, it's super cool if that happens, because that's kind of the, to an extent, that's the objective of a forgiveness practice. If tears are coming as we're releasing things, that means we're releasing things. We're releasing tension that's been holding that emotion back. And because of that, it might need to be expressed. If we feel tears coming and we try to clamp down on it, we try to stop it, we're just adding more layers of repression, more layers of resistance to something that was, in this moment, the mind decided was ready to let go of. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. A nice light meditation for Thursday night. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. Closing the eyes, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Settling into a natural rhythm of breathing. Noticing as you focus on the breath if there's any tension within the process of breathing itself, any sense of forcing breath in or squeezing breath out, and see if you can drop it, allowing breath to flow in, allowing breath to flow out. Extending the softening of tension up to the forehead and the eyes. Relaxing them all the way through the in-breath and all the way through the out. down into the jaw, the neck, and the shoulders, relaxing all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. And then down into the chest and the area around the heart. Noticing how it feels to breathe in the chest. And noticing if there's any sense of tension or restriction there. Consciously relax it. You could even think of the breath flowing through the tension, dissolving it away all the way through the in-breath, and keeping it relaxed all the way through the out-breath. Now we can begin working with this forgiveness meditation, allowing the breath to kind of fade into the background of our awareness. It's still there, but it's not the focal point. We can establish a gentle smile on the face for the remainder of the meditation, smiling not only with the mouth, but the eyes as well. It creates a positive feedback loop for the mind, guiding our awareness to sensation of the chest. We can begin internally working with the phrase, I forgive myself for not handling things differently. Noticing how it feels for the heart and softening any tension. If you want, you could even hold an image of yourself as a child in your heart. I forgive myself for not handling things differently. Recognize the mind has wandered. Release your hold on the distraction. Not gripping onto it, but also not pushing it away. Just releasing. Relaxing the forehead and the shoulders. Reestablishing that gentle smile. And returning to forgiveness. To the sensation of forgiveness. I forgive myself for not handling things differently. Inevitably, with forgiveness practice, a certain person may come to mind. If you know why they came to mind, there's no need to ruminate about it. If you're not sure why they came to mind, there's no need to figure it out. But when this happens, you can make them the object of your meditation, holding an image of them in the heart and sending this sensation of forgiveness towards them. I forgive you, and you can think their name, for not handling things differently. Again, noticing any physical resistance to that and consciously relaxing it. Recognize the mind has wandered, maybe lost in blame or regret. Release the distraction. Relax any built up tension. Reestablish that gentle smile and return to forgiveness. Shifting the visualization slightly, imagining this person forgiving you in return. Hearing them say, I too forgive you for not handling things differently. Noticing any resistance and consciously softening into it. I too forgive you for not handling things differently. That's enough of them. Send this person on their way. And return to sensation of breath. Relaxing forehead, jaw, shoulders, chest, anywhere else that was tense throughout the body. All the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Slowly opening the eyes when ready. Stretching if needed. As always, after the meditation, I'm interested to hear if anyone would like to share how that experience was for them. Whether you found it easy, difficult, straightforward, confusing, or whatever else you may be sitting with in this moment.
Feel relatively calm and pretty focused. I think a lot of my other meditations past weeks have been a little more chaotic, but I think having those prompts kind of kept me within a certain lane, only straying ever so far. But yeah, it's good.
I find it hard to forgive myself or others forgiving me if I can't think of something specific. I did think of specific but didn't dwell on it. Just moved on. That's the way to do it.
Whatever works, works. So with this practice, the reason that I give the suggestion of focus on the phrase, don't get into the specifics of it, is because sometimes people will hear forgiveness meditation or hear whatever the type of meditation is, and then immediately think, okay, I'm going to use this to work on this specific thing. But I've found that with most of these kind of heart practices, it's best to allow the mind to show you what's ready, to work through. So when we use these like forgiveness phrases, things will come to mind, but we don't have to make the executive decision before we start the meditation what past mistakes we're going to decide to dwell on for the meditation. And the same thing with the instruction of, if you know why this person came up, you don't need to rehash it. If you don't know why they came up, you don't need to figure it out. Is because they're coming up because it's time for them to come up. 9 times out of 10. Sometimes we're thrown a curveball, but 9 times out of 10, it's because the conditions are right in the mind for this person to come up for this type of practice. So it tends to come up. We're not dwelling on it. We can think of a specific situation, but we're not trying to dwell on it or trying to specifically think about how we wish we would have handled it differently. Like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, blah, 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 blah. It's not really that helpful. That's something that can be helpful outside of the meditation when we want to learn from our mistakes. But with this practice here, where we're trying to allow things to come up and soften our resistance to them, or our kind of let some of that energy that's in those thoughts or memories dissipate a bit. Does that kind of address your question?
Yeah, just kind of to go on what you just said, like a couple months ago we did, I think a meditation, and the same person came up, but that time I forgive myself, but then afterwards, still trying to justify my side of it and realizing, oh, wait, I haven't totally kind of forgiven myself yet. And then this one, the conditions of those 2 months or however long, I truly was able to kind of forgive myself and not justify it. So,
Nice. It's awesome when we can recognize the progress. Sometimes progress can happen so incrementally that we don't necessarily notice it. So it's awesome when we get that opportunity to think, oh, this really is working. Yeah. Did anyone have an interesting experience when you switched from forgiving someone to them forgiving you in return?
Yeah, definitely.
I always find that's my favorite part of this meditation, because I tend to, I do have a tendency to kind of play the victim in most situations, or in a lot of situations, not most, but in a lot of situations. So when I'm sitting there doing the forgiveness for whoever happens to come up, it's like, it's almost to some extent, I'm like putting myself up on a pedestal, like, here is my forgiveness, and kind of like getting a bit puffed up about myself about it. Like, man, I'm so cool being able to forgive you for what you did to me, blah, blah, blah. To an extent, I mean, that's not my literal narrative, but it's kind of coming from a bit of that place. And then when I switch to them forgiving me in return, it's kind of like a, whoa, I didn't do anything. And it's it's that kind of moment of pushback of every situation has two people, at least two people involved in that interaction. Every interaction has at least two people. So I had parts to play. And sometimes it can be hard when it feels like what the other person did was so bad that it eclipses whatever maybe less bad thing that you did in that situation. But you still did it, even if it's been eclipsed by what they did in your mind. And it's helpful to recognize that, because that's some of the resentments or the remorse that we hold on to that we just won't even realize we're holding on to, but it is weighing on us. We recognize the resentment in that situation, the other person's actions eclipsing it, but we don't recognize the remorse that we have in that situation, the remorse that we have about how we handled that situation. Because chances are, whatever's coming up during the forgiveness meditation, 9 times out of 10, we had a chance to handle it better than we did in the moment, even if we were not the one to blame or the one at fault or whatever. All subjective, but yeah. So I'll talk a little bit more about right action. I might consult my cheat sheet, I might not. So that sutra I read in the beginning, I'll read one more that's kind of along the same lines, and then I'll talk a bit more about it. This is the one that actually starts with, skillful virtues have freedom from remorse as their reward. And this one actually goes, the first one went just from how virtue leads to concentration, or how virtue acts as a support for concentration. This one goes all the way from how virtue leads to release, nirvana, enlightenment. So skillful virtues have freedom from remorse as their reward. Freedom from remorse leads to joy. Joy leads to rapture. Rapture leads to calm. Calm leads to pleasure or pleasant sensation in the body. Pleasure leads to concentration. Concentration leads to knowledge and vision of things as they have come to be. So in other words, seeing things as they are. Knowledge and vision of things as they have come to be leads to disenchantment. Disenchantment leads to dispassion, and dispassion leads to knowledge and vision of release. In this way, skillful virtues lead step by step to liberation. So the part that I'll define a little bit there is this last portion, because it gets a little The first like 5 are pretty common terms that we'd be at least relatively familiar with, maybe with the exception of rapture. Rapture in Buddhist thought isn't, it's not like everyone floating up into the sky. It's rapture is a sense of the breath fully inhabiting the body, the breath and awareness filling the body. That's rapture. And then rapture leads to calm, because when the breath is filling the body, awareness is filling the body, a lot of the tension, a lot of the tightness throughout the body relaxes and the body grows calm. And then calm leads to pleasure. When the body relaxes, there's this very slight, subtle, pleasant sensation that kind of fills the body. Can feel tingly, can feel electric, can feel however you want it to feel. It's different for everyone. But it's a mild, subtle, pleasant sensation that kind of fills the body. When the body is filled with that pleasant sensation, the mind very easily becomes concentrated, because we've made the present moment a pleasant moment and a comfortable place to stay. Then through concentration, through centering the mind, not removing all thoughts, but just centering the mind so thoughts can come and go as they please, and we're not getting blown around by them. An image that's often given is a post in the ocean. The waves ebb and flow, but the post remains where it is. So through that concentration comes knowledge and vision of things as they have come to be. Meaning when the mind has stilled to a certain extent, has focused and concentrated to a certain extent, we stop bringing all of our storylines, all of our baggage, all of our trauma to everything that we're looking at. Because that's what we do. But when the mind is concentrated, a lot of that, we get a little bit of space from all of that. And we're able to see things as they are in that moment. Not as we want them to be, not as we thought that they should be, not as we fear them to be, but simply as they are in that moment, without bringing all of our stuff to bear on them. Then from knowledge and vision of things as they have come to be leads to disenchantment. In other words, you see through the enchantments, the spells that we've put ourselves under through a lifetime of living however we've lived, thinking however we've thought, that led us to come here and sit and try to figure things out. You become disenchanted with that way of thinking. You become disenchanted with the illusions that we've created for ourselves. And then through disenchantment comes dispassion. So you see through it, and then dispassion is that since you have seen through it, there's no longer that obsessive drive to try to fix, control, and manipulate things. You lose that passion, not passion in general. Within Buddhist practice, I like to think of when they use the term passion more as in the context of like a crime of passion. No one wants that kind of passion. Or another word could be obsession or obsessiveness or neuroticism. So dispassion, the absence of obsession. And then from dispassion comes knowledge and vision of release. When we allow ourselves to let go of things, we allow ourselves to see things as they are, the mind becomes very still, very calm, and things start to make a little more sense. We start to release a lot of what we've been holding on to. Knowledge and vision of release isn't just like final, total enlightenment, but it's letting go of things that aren't helpful anymore, letting go of habits and behaviors that aren't helpful anymore. And all of that comes about simply through skillful virtues. So it's pretty sweet. All you have to do is show up here on Thursdays at 5:00 and everything else will work itself out. Every Thursday at 5:00, we gather downstairs and prepare sandwiches to hand out to to anyone who sleeps on the streets at night in downtown San Diego. So you can go practice skillful virtue every Thursday at 5:00. Yeah. So my favorite sutras are the sutras that kind of go through those lists like that. I'm very analytical, and I like knowing the reason behind things. Like, it's not just being good for the sake of being good or being good because I was told to be good, which, being good for the sake of being good is a beautiful motivation, and it's an incredible place for the mind to be coming from. But to know how it fits into the bigger picture helps me on days where I'm not so motivated to behave skillfully or virtuously, or it seems like it's too much work, or it seems like there's not enough payoff from it. And it helps remind me that there's actually a world of spiritual wealth that comes from behaving skillfully, acting virtuously. So when we're talking about what is skillful virtue, because I feel like I should probably define that since I'm hyping it up so much. As I mentioned in the beginning, the way that the Buddha defined right action, which is one of three aspects of virtue within Buddhist practice, is all of the virtue aspects of the path the Buddha defined as abstaining from certain activities. He didn't define it as you must do this and this and this. He defined it as, in the case of right action, not stealing, not killing, and not causing harm through our sexual behavior. Pretty basic stuff. And it seems fairly straightforward until you realize that when he says no killing, he also means bugs or anything else that's mildly inconvenient that sometimes we don't give a second thought to squishing or consuming. And then through stealing. Stealing is just taking what is not given. So we can steal other people's time. We can steal objects, of course, but we could steal other people's time. Things like that too. So there's nuanced layers to it. But I love that the Buddha defines virtue by what not to do, because it just creates a really solid foundation. In my mind, if I tell myself those are three things that under no circumstance am I allowed to do, then they're taken off the table. I don't have to wrestle with moral dilemmas or try to justify, well, what about in this situation? What about in that situation? And try to poke holes in the logic of it. Not trying to poke holes in the logic of it, because the tendency, and sometimes in class, sometimes in this class, when I bring up the precepts or I bring up virtue, someone might give out like, well, what about in this very specific situation? Could I lie then? Or could I steal then? Or could I kill in this situation if it was to, presenting like a trolley problem, basically. We're not in that situation. There's no point in entertaining the thought. Ultimately, if you find yourself in one of those situations, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. And it's not up to me to tell you what you should absolutely do in those situations. It's up to you to rationalize within your own mind what you would do in those situations. I can only present that those three qualities of action, killing, stealing, and causing sexual harm, never have any real benefit to them. They never are a condition for happiness. They're never a condition for freedom from remorse. They're not skillful. They're not helpful. And by making that pact with yourself, that vow with yourself to not indulge in that, it makes life a lot simpler. We're not clawing for scraps of happiness in unskillful ways. We're trying to cultivate something real and lasting right here in the heart and in the mind within this moment. Yeah. So I'll stop there for any questions. Anyone has any questions on any of that?
What if you try to do Buddhism, but you keep feeling superior to other people, and then kind of isolate yourself from the rest of the public? How you escape that?
That doesn't sound hypothetical.
I make peace with people if I'm trapped in my own personality.
Yeah. So how do you prevent yourself from isolating yourself
Right.
using this practice as justification for it?
Right.
So one thing is to remind yourself that for however many years you weren't practicing Buddhism, this is at least for me, for a majority of my life, I wasn't practicing Buddhism. And for a majority of my life, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I didn't think there was anything bad about that. Wasn't a big fan of myself, but I didn't really think there was anything wrong with that or anything lacking there. And to acknowledge that everyone is on their own journey. And someone might find something completely different from this practice that helps them grow and change and evolve in much the same way that this practice helped me grow and change and evolve. So I try my best not to have that kind of Buddhist arrogance or that sense of superiority just because I'm sitting here practicing or just because I'm sitting up here leading. I'm just as much a mess as anyone else who comes here. They decided to set this mess up on the platform here to talk to all of you. So I try my best not to put too much weight on that. It's something that's helped me. It's something that's beneficial to me, but it's not something that I should, just because it worked for me, it's not something that I should be going door to door telling everyone else they need to do. Or if you would just meditate, this would fix all your problems. It won't. It'll make you vastly more aware of all of your problems, but you still have to fix the problems yourself. And it's not necessarily Buddhist practice that's fixing the problems. It's our own actions within those moments that's fixing the problems. So it doesn't have to be Buddhist practice to be beneficial. As far as how do I prevent myself from isolating myself, that almost feels like a different question in a sense. I force myself to socialize because I do isolate myself. I'm not particularly big on presenting to a group, honestly, but I was set up here, so I'm going to. But I've found it beneficial because it prevents me from fully isolating myself. Because I oftentimes think I would be entirely content sitting in a cave in the middle of nowhere somewhere. But human interaction is important sometimes in moderate doses. Kind of like when you build up a resistance to a poison in small amounts. Not that social interaction is a poison, but for me at least, sometimes it feels that way. So I put myself in situations where I have no choice but to socialize. I do the class here. If I go to any other group that has any kind of fellowship afterwards, I go to the fellowship. I just put myself in situations where I have to socialize. And sometimes that goes well, and sometimes I still isolate myself. But creating the conditions where I feel kind of obligated to socialize really helps me. Does that kind of address your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? We have time for one more question.
I have a random one. I don't know how it connects with coming to my mind. In Buddhism, anyway, at what age would we be accountable? Like as children, like what age are we actually accountable for our actions?
Man, we're gonna end on that one. So, let me see if I can exercise my one semester of child psychology. No, so it was more like 3 weeks. So
Yeah, it's not a quick and easy. Is it?
it's not a simple question, and it's not. We're accountable for our own actions when we become aware that we're accountable for our own actions. I wouldn't be able to give a specific age range or anything like that. And it's also kind of, it's one of those questions that's not necessarily, there's not an inherent benefit to exploring it, at least to apply it to my own practice or to apply it to your own practice. but we become accountable for our own actions when we start taking accountability for our own actions. I mean, we have an entire lifetime of habits and conditioned behavior that we haven't taken accountability for. At what point do we start taking accountability? At whatever point we start taking accountability.
Thinking more of when are we capable of it, because I mean, when you're born, I mean, especially when you're first born, you're completely a leech, like you can't survive on your own.
Yeah.
You can't, it's impossible. And you don't know anything. So I was just thinking, like, when does that innate innocence end? And of course, there could be a stage later in life where you recognize something you did inappropriately, but you weren't really accountable then, but you're accountable now, and you might go and make amends for something you did when you didn't have, a level of understanding. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about as a child, like, when is the brain even capable, or the soul, or the psyche, or whatever it is, capable, and then universally, when would they be considered to be like, okay, you should be accountable at this point?
I do think that we're capable of taking accountability for at least how we feel a lot younger than we would think we are, or that you would generally think that you are. Because I've seen young children who will recognize how they're feeling and choose to change how they're feeling. And it seems so foreign to me because they're so young. But
However, they could have been parented
yeah,
to do that.
it's a matter of when are we capable, and when do we have the tools to do it? Have we been taught the tools to do it? Because I think we're innately capable of it, at least we're capable of it at least at an age where we're able to understand what people are saying to us, and then have the tools to do it. But yeah, it's an interesting thought to ponder.
I think you have to consider when impulse control develops. Child can't be responsible for actions that are impulsive, that they really haven't developed the ability to manage those impulses. It's why I have an 11-year-old, and the impulse control is not there yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of action that is shocking, because a lot of the time, again, it's been important to me to parent a child who's aware of their emotions and their feelings and understands them. But the impulse control, I'm waiting for it. And I think I've got years to wait for it.
I think they even say that the brain is still even developing. I mean, there's always new neural connections, but like, as far as development, even in the 20s.
25.
It's a 20.
I think it's your prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed to your
Something, yeah, I've been hearing this more and more. So, yeah. It's interesting.
So we'll go ahead and close with that.
Before that, one quick, would you have a handout on this sometime this month?
So yes, for anyone watching at home, there's a link to the handout in the description. I did not print them out. I will most likely have them next week. Yeah, and we'll have those 2 sutras that I read from, and then some other stuff.
I didn't know this was online. Is it through Zoom or Skype or?
It's getting streamed live on YouTube.
On YouTube.
Yeah, the Dharmabum Temple YouTube.
Keep working with that.
Yeah. Our millions of followers are tuned in right now. All 1 million of them. So we'll go ahead and close with a dedication of merit, and then we have some announcements. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or exception, be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sangha teya cheta sa chaturi sambartva viharati samabuddharu bhavena samadhammaru bhavena samasangharu bhavena sote hantu nirantaran.